Are you a roller coaster daredevil? I want you to take just a minute, and for the person next to you, just turn to them for a second. Tell them the scariest roller coaster you've ever ridden in your life. Name it if you can, but then just tell them what was scary about it. And if you're not a roller coaster daredevil, confess that too, okay? Take a moment and do that. I wish all of you could have had my vantage point to just watch you. You know, I don't know what coasters you were naming, but your hand motion said it all. Some of you went like this, and then most of you went like this, and there was just this sense of where these things are going. You know, they call these things names like the Beast and the Vortex, and I mean, they give them names, death-sounding kind of names, that make you think, is it really wise to get on these things or not? Now, how many of you in the room say, I would not get on a roller coaster if my life depended on it? Do I have a few? Okay, there are a few hands up in the room that are there. I remember when our youngest daughter, Abby, this was years ago, when we would take her to amusement parks and she would look at the roller coasters, and she wasn't tall enough to meet the height restriction line yet. And she would just sit there and she would watch them, and she would go, boy, one day I'm going to be able to ride that. I remember the year that she finally was tall enough. So she marched up to that height restriction line on the toughest roller coaster in the park. And she just squared herself and stretched her spine by a good 3/4 of an inch and barely met the line. And the person said, you're good to go. And she looked straight at me and said, Dad, let's ride this one. You know, not wanting to appear a chicken in the eyes of your young daughter who's now growing taller, I said, yeah, let's go ride this one. So I remember we crawled in. And, you know, they buckle you in, and then this thing comes over the top of you, and then you hold on to this thing, and, you know, it's just like you're all strapped in, and I'm looking at her, and she's just having the time of her life, just having a blast. And so we start. You know, you go out of the station, just so slow, around that first curve, and then these giant chains connect with spokes and pull you heavenward. Click, 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 click. You're up above the roofs, you're up above the treetops, you're up above the clouds, you're way, way up here. And about the time you're at the top, and you just don't dare look down. I'm sitting there just holding onto the bar, white knuckling that thing for all that I've got. And about the time you get to the top, I mean, that thing just plunges. It plunges so fast you can taste your toenails. I mean, it's just booming to the bottom. And then you get to the bottom and it jerks up and around this way and goes through a double upside down loop. And just about the time I'm thinking about taking a breath, I look over at Abby and she's going, woo! Just hands in the air, having the time of her life. And then another sharp bank to the right, another turn, then upside, and then all of a sudden, the air brakes and you're pulling into the station. Wow. Man, what a ride. I remember getting off and just kind of walking away, and Abby looked up at me and she said, Dad, what was your favorite part? And I thought, how do you dissect a blur? Zoom. Well, now here's my Forrest Gump moment in the sermon tonight. Life is like a roller coaster. You start off really slow. You climb these hills, and then there are peaks and plunges in it. There's some double upside down loops, just enough to take your breath away, some sharp turns you didn't see coming, and before you know it, you're pulling into the station and someone else is taking your seat and your ride is over. Life happens that way. Life is a blur. Now, that's hard to understand when you're exceptionally young, but the older you get, the more you understand how rapidly life just moves by and passes by. I've been doing some reading recently, and three of my favorite authors that I would reference just briefly here, that have helped me understand this. One is a Catholic priest named Richard Rohr, Rohr. He's written a book called, forget the name of the book right now. Falling Upwards. And he makes this, I think he's right. He says we spend the first half of our life building a container that defines us. You know, your container is, this is my degree, this is my clothes style, this is the music that I like, this is who I plan to spend the rest of my life with, these are my 2.5 kids and a dog, this is the kind of car I want to drive, this is the job that I do, this is the degree that I have. You know, the first half of your life, it's about constructing this container that holds all that is uniquely you. And you build that thing, and then there comes this point somewhere in midlife where you no longer need to build the container anymore, and you start stepping back and looking in the container and trying to figure out what of this is really important and what of this is not. What of this has great value and what doesn't? What of this am I willing to give my life to, and what of this I'd be fine without? There is this building the container phase, and then there is this analyzing and clarifying and living with it kind of phase that is there. So he says life is made up into these two halves. Another one of my favorite authors, a guy named William Bridges, who wrote a book called Transitions, he says life is an intersecting group of endings, neutral zones, and beginnings. Endings, neutral zone, and beginnings. And he said, we've just got hundreds of these in our life. Most of you in the room know. I mean, an ending of my high school years. So, I'm a senior, and I'm graduating as a high school senior, and I'm finishing. So here's an ending of something. I won't ever go back to high school again. I won't ever be in the same room with these people again. And then I go into this neutral zone of college. Of the summer where I'm getting ready to go to Eastern Nazarene College. And then there's that freshman transition where I'm now in this awkward phase. I'm in a neutral zone. I'm not where I used to be, and yet this place where I am doesn't fully feel like home yet. I haven't fully settled in. And so there's a neutral zone with all the challenges of that. And then there's kind of like the new beginning. Oh, I've got this. I'm a college student. I'm here. And about the time you get that ending, neutral zone, and new beginning figured out, now you're at the end of your college years, and here's another ending, which is going to take you into another neutral zone, which is going to take you into another new beginning. And then maybe you get married, and here's an ending of singleness and a neutral zone of this relationship. And then you're in, and life is a series of these endings and neutral zones and new beginnings. And the model he used, I think, is quite appropriate. The story of the Exodus in the Scriptures, where they have the ending of slavery in Egypt in those last days that they're there and they're figuring out how to get out from under Pharaoh's thumb. Then the neutral zone of the 40 years that are there in the wilderness, and they're figuring out how to get bread out of the heavens and water out of the rock and what to do about this barren place they live in. And then the new beginning when they cross into the promised land. Life has these endings and neutral zones and new beginnings. And it's kind of a series of that. We've known that here in the ENC community. Endings that we have had. And neutral zones of trying to adjust to all that. And then the new beginnings that come. So Bridges says life is these two things. Build your container and then figure out if what you put in it's really good or not. Bridges says that it's things that end and neutral zones and new beginnings. And then a guy named Walter Brueggemann, my favorite Old Testament scholar of all of them, he talks about life as orientations, disorientations, and new orientations. Matter of fact, he says the Psalms, which we're working out of all week this week together, he says the Psalms are actually written from those three places. The places where we are oriented. We kind of have our feet up underneath us and we know what's going on. And then something comes along that totally disorients us. And out of that, if life is going to be good and go forward, we have to find a new orientation, a way to understand the world differently than what we have ever understood it before. And that life is these movements. So roller coasters help me. Roller coasters help me think about this because life feels like a whoosh. But if you can stop life long enough and sort of look at it in its frozen frames of time, like times like this give us a chance to do, you sort of break it down and you begin to realize, I'm in one of these, or I'm in one of these. Or I'm really working hard to get my container built right now. Or I'm looking into my container and asking serious questions about it. Or I'm just really good right now. I'm oriented. Everything around me is moving in the direction I want it to move. Or something has happened to you and you're going, I'm really disoriented right now. I feel like I'm in a neutral zone somewhere. And I kind of want to go back, but I really don't want to go back. And I'd like to go forward, but I don't know how to go forward from where I am. These are the kind of places that our life finds us. One of the great gifts of the Psalms is this. They are the prayers, the honest, emotional, thoughtful prayers of the people of God in all of these kinds of times. The Psalms, I like to say, are frozen frames in time. When you're able to look into a particular human experience and recognize that this psalmist is revealing something out of his or her community's soul out of this particular time that is going on. And Psalms are great for this. I've always believed that Psalms come from three different places. Psalms are, first of all, Psalms are written from the pits. You know where the pits are. The pits, they call these Psalms the Psalms of Lament. This is where life is hard, evil is winning, God seems absent, enemies are hounding us, we're trapped, all is hopeless, we are disoriented and discouraged. That's the pit. And about a third of the Psalms they're called these lament Psalms, and they're written right out of the experience of the pits. The next place that Psalms are written from is a place called the rock. Now, the rock is the solid ground just outside the pit. You've kind of crawled up the side of this murky, miry pit that you've been in, and you've been delivered in some way. And God has heard our cry. God has defeated our enemy, has healed us or protected us or saved us. And here we are standing on the rock with the exuberance of just having come out of the pit. And we're singing, hallelujah, praise the Lord. There is passion and joy and exuberance. Absence has turned to presence. Weeping has turned to joy. We've traded our sackcloth for dancing shoes. The rock, it is a great place to stand. And we know when we're there, just the sense of the joy of the Lord that got us through this and got us out of this. So you've got the pit, the rock, and the third place Psalms are written from is the mountaintop. Now, the mountaintop are these a little bit more historical Psalms, which remember God and name God over long periods of time. Mountaintop Psalms name God in pits and name God in rocks, but they're looking back and reflecting on God. They think about the wisdom they have learned from all the places that God has taken them. And the mountaintop Psalms sort of hover over the blur of life and help us get a perspective on the whole thing at one time. The anguish of the pit is now behind us, but we still remember it on the mountaintop. The exuberance of the rock is behind us, but we still remember it from the mountaintop with great gratitude. Mountain psalms tend to hold the pit and the rock together. Mountain psalms seem to speak about the time we built our container and then the time that we analyzed our container. Mountain psalms are able to hold the endings and the neutral zones and the new beginnings together, and the orientations and disorientations and new orientations together. Mountain Psalms are able to do that, and they conclude great things about God, things about God's glory, or things about God's great faithfulness. Well, tonight, I want to preach one of those mountaintop psalms. We're already way through the sermon, so don't worry that was just the introduction. Psalm 23. Psalm 23. It's the one psalm that I don't care what version I read it in, the King James Version is still screaming in the back of my mind. Because the 23rd Psalm in the King James Version is probably the most prayed, read, and repeated psalm of all of them in the Scriptures, and may well be, in human literature, the most spoken words that have ever been written at any time. So let's kind of give it a shot together from your memory out of the King James. I'll just sort of read you into it, and if you would, just say it right along with me as you're able to. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my cup with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy have followed me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This somehow captures the journey of life. And I admit to you, I really hate to tinker with this particular psalm. It seems irreverent to me to take an exegetical, sermonic scalpel to this psalm. But there's a truth in this that I missed for years and years and years. There is an image shift halfway through the psalm that opens us up to a little different meaning than I think what we normally have with it. So let's just dive in. We begin this psalm, and we're in it. We begin as sheep. So we're all sheep. Put on your sheepskin if you don't mind. Just kind of pull your sheepskin up around you like a nor'easterner really is coming in, and not the fake one of this past week. But, you know, the storm is coming, so your sheepskin, we're bad sheepskin. Now, we sheep aren't exactly shakers and movers. We don't control the destiny of nations. Wall Street isn't rising and falling based on any wisdom that we happen to have. We cannot defend ourselves from any of our predators. We live where water is scarce and pasture is rare, and wolves and bears are even deadlier. And we're destined to be sheared, shish kebabbed, and turned into sweaters. This is who we are. We're sheep. Now, given this fragile, non-direction, non-taking initiative kind of animals that we are, it really sounds strange for us to say something like we do in this psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I want for nothing. I have no needs. We're actually confessing here not something that we do, but something that is done to us and for us. Because this good shepherd we have, he beds us down in grassy pastures. He leads us to refreshing streams. He guides us along safe paths. He beats the beast off that would devour us, and he crooknecks us back into the fold. He is a marvelous shepherd, and we owe our life to him. This past summer, a group of Trevecca students went over to the Holy Land, and they took a group of religion majors and a group of film study students together, and they shot a documentary there. And they came back and told me a story that I didn't know. They asked me, they said, have you ever been on the Jericho Road? And I said, yeah, I have. Matter of fact, they said I was at a monastery that is at the top of that road as it goes along. It's a pretty treacherous path along the side of a mountain with not a very wide path at all, and it goes straight down into a valley. And they said, yeah, we were at the same monastery. Did you notice what was at the bottom of the valley? Because if you stand there in the monastery and you look straight across, you see another mountain just right over there. And then straight down almost, there is this valley that you really can't see into the valley because of where you are. And this valley is such that the east and the west of the sun does not get to it for very long in the day. So there's a lot of shadow down in there. And one of the monks there said, that's what's referred to in the psalm as the valley of the shadow of death. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for the good shepherd is with me. And so the students came back and they're telling me about this. They said the shepherds knew that because this was a cool place, I mean, the mountains are just kind of burnt brown. There aren't many trees or anything on them. But down in this valley, a stream flows through it, and the trees grow up, and there are lush meadows and everything. But there are a lot of wolves and bear and devouring creatures kind of down in there. But the shepherds knew that if they were going to get their sheep to water and grass, they needed to take them here. But they knew they would also have to defend them from the devouring animals that would be there. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, which they used against the devouring animals, they comfort me, because those are what protect me in this way. Literally, what he's saying is that in the pits that we often enter, that we have to enter to be able to do what we do in life. And in these times where there's a double upside down loop, or the plunges and the neutral zones and the disorientation and all that happens, when we find ourselves in these places where we can easily be swallowed whole and devoured, in those places, what gives us the greatest comfort is that simple line, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. The presence of God in the pits of life is one of the things that this mountaintop psalmist remembers most profoundly about his life. And I think that's an important thing for us to know. What makes the difference in whether we live or die in the pit places of life is whether we become aware of the shepherd who is with us, the God who is present with us in those moments. Now, this 23rd Psalm, I want to argue with it sometimes. It sounds too sentimental for me. I have no need. You take me to this, and you guide me here, and you protect me from this deal. It's a little syrupy for the world that I live in. The kind of world where millions of teenagers get out and march because the adults in charge of government won't take charge of the kind of gun violence that goes in the world where we are. I mean, that's not a world where I would say I don't need anything. The kind of world where jobs end swiftly, or the evening news begins with 3 murders and a rape. The world where friends die young and terrorists strike fear. The kind of world where white supremacists march and politicians disappoint and spouses cheat and cancer comes and kids go bad. I want for nothing. I fear no evil. Sounds too good to be true to me. Is it even possible to live in such a way that in the pits of the world that we live in, we are so aware of the presence of this good shepherd that we fear no evil and that we lack nothing? Can we be that sure? Can we be that confident in the presence of God in these places? The mountaintop psalm seems to suggest we can. Now, I told you there was a shift halfway through the psalm, so we're there. We're going to do it. So take off your sheepskins, and if you would, pile them at the back door as you're on the way out. As soon as you go out the door, we have hired gangs and thugs with knives and guns and all kind of bad things. And we have hired them as soon as you walk out of the church tonight to start chasing you. And they will chase you. And if they catch you, they will kill you. Okay? If they catch you, they will kill you. And you're going to have to run. And as you run, there will be no place that you can tuck into anywhere. You're just going to run. And before you know it, you're going to run out of town, and you're going to find yourself out in the wilderness, and you're going to run all night long. And then you're going to run tomorrow. And you're going to be running tomorrow for so long, and the sun is going to start beating down on you, and the muscles in your legs are going to be burning, and they're going to be right there on your heels, and they're going to be chasing you, and they're coming after you hard. And before you know it, you're going to run so far into tomorrow that your forehead's going to be sunburned, beet red. Your tongue's going to be thick because you just want something to drink. Your lips are going to be cracked. And you're just going to be so tired and worn out. And, you're hounded and you're chased. That introduces us to the image of the second half of this particular psalm. Because a traveler is being hounded and chased by his enemies. And he's out in the desert, apparently. And as he's being chased in this way, he's just about gone. He's out of strength. He has nothing to drink. He doesn't know what else to do. And he tops a sand dune, and he's just about ready to collapse and give in and let the thugs catch him and finish him off. But as he tops the dune, he looks, and there is this encampment right in front of him. And as he makes his way to the encampment, there is a person there who welcomes him in. And he welcomes him in, and he takes soothing oil and he rubs it across the sunburned forehead that he has. He gives him a tall glass of ice water so that he can drink, and he keeps his cup filled. And he feeds him this sumptuous meal as he reclines there in that moment, looking back over the dune and seeing those thugs that were chasing him over there scowling because he has stumbled into this gracious encampment where he is found. And this gracious host anoints his head with oil. His cup flows over and keeps overflowing. And a feast is spread before him in the presence of his enemies. And as you eat that meal in the tent of this gracious host, you conclude, surely goodness and mercy have followed me here. I want to dwell here in the house of this particular host forever and ever. Psalm 23 is these two images. We are vulnerable sheep who have a good shepherd that leads us into and out of the pits that we find ourselves in and sustains us in these places. And we have a gracious host, so that when life gets hard and we are chased and hounded by that which can kill us, this host welcomes us into himself in a way that refreshes and restores our life. This is the kind of God, the good shepherd, the gracious host, that the mountaintop psalm remembers and writes about. I'm convinced of this. The holy life is possible only when we are conscious of the presence of this God. The holy life is possible only when we are conscious of the presence of this God. The only way to make life work out, whether you're over here building your container with all you've got, is to be aware of God in that moment. Or when you're over here analyzing what you built and looking back into it, for God to be with you in that moment, so that your life is not one of regret or false pride or arrogance or anything like that about the container that you built. God has to be in these moments. God has to be with you in the endings. The ones that you want to happen and the ones you don't want to happen. God has to be with us in the neutral zones when we kind of want to go back, but we really need to go forward and we don't know what to do and we've got all these questions. God has to be with us in the new beginnings that are there. God has to be with us when we are oriented and disoriented and becoming newly oriented. God has to be with us in pits and on rocks. God has to be with us in these moments. And it's not that God is not with us. It is, have we practiced ourselves to know and experience His presence in those particular moments, even the ones when God seems to be absent? Do we know this about this God who is ours? I'm thinking about Moses, standing in front of the bush that burns and it doesn't burn. The voice speaks to him and says to Moses, I want you to go tell Pharaoh that I said, let my people go. And Moses is arguing, who do I say sent me? And God says, tell him that Yahweh has sent you, the one who is, was, and always will be. This one has sent you, and I will be with you. Go, and I will be with you. Now, the interesting thing here about this psalm that imagines this God who is always present with us as a great shepherd, good shepherd, and a gracious host. The amazing thing about it is this God is not like any other gods that Old Testament people knew about. All the other gods of all the other tribes of the Old Testament days were gods that lived in pantheons and castles and temples and ornate places and in the skies or buried within nature somewhere. They were these ethereal gods, and you went looking for them. You went to try to find them. You took with you offerings to placate them. You tried to get to these gods. They're out there somewhere. If I can only find them and I get them to help me. But this is a God who is imaged as a God who is as near as the Good Shepherd, as present as the gracious host. This is a God who finds us. This is a God who says to Moses, listen, I have seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries. I have felt in my gut the oppression that they're under. And I am going to them, and through you I will go to them. This is a God who makes his way to where we are. Ours is a God who comes and finds us, not a God who waits to be found somewhere. He comes to us in all these kind of ways. The same God comes to us in the flesh and blood of Jesus. And it's immediately told us in John's gospel that he will pitch his tent among us. He will dwell among us. This is a God for whom when the people of God came out of Egypt and they were going through the neutral zone, this is a God who kind of, not only did he dwell among them in the tent that was set up there, but he became a pillar of fire in the sky at night, or a cloud during the day to guide them. He was right there with them, like, here I am, follow me, let's go here. This is a God who became present to his people in these ways. I love the story over in Exodus 32 and 33. Where Moses is really ticked with the people, and Moses is done with them. I mean, they're griping and complaining about the neutral zone that they're in right now, the disorientation. Hey, let's just all go back to Egypt. At least we had something to eat over there. You know, we had a cafeteria over there. Pioneer was dependable. That's better. And then just standing out here and waiting for bread to fall out of the heavens and water to come out of rocks. Let's go back. And Moses is done with them. And he says, God, I'm done with your people. And God says, I am too. I'm going to give up on them. And I'm going to start all over with you and make a brand new people out of you, Moses. And Moses changes his tune immediately. And he says, oh no, God, if you do that, what will the Egyptians say? If you turn your back on your people now, you've always been with them. If you abandon them now, what will they say? I love it. There's this great argument. I've felt like this as a pastor a few times in my life, where God is saying, Moses, these are your people. And Moses is saying, oh, no, they're not. They're your people. No, they're not. They're yours. No, they're yours. No, they're yours. And this back and forth happens between them until finally Moses says this to God, unless you go with us, we are not moving 1 square inch from here. What is he saying to God? It is your presence that distinguishes us. Apart from you, we're just a religious group. We're just a tribe that escaped. Without you, you are the only thing. Your presence is what distinguishes us. And this psalm is about this presence of God. And the truth is, without the presence of God, we are nothing special in this world at all. Nothing can replace this current presence of God among us. Not great preaching or singing or services or feeding programs or recovery ministries or social justice or buildings or organizational structures or books or banners or slogans. Nothing can replace the presence of God in the midst of his people. And the good news is that Psalm 23 and all of Scripture continue to say to us, the Lord is with us. We will not fear. For you are with us. Even when we're running for our life, we will run into your arms, because surely goodness and mercy are with us all the days of our life. In the closing pages of Revelation 21, we were there this morning when the holy city comes down. God just makes that announcement one more time in case we haven't heard it all the way back from Genesis. Look, see, the dwelling of God is among his people. I will dwell with you. I will be your God, and you will be my people. Life's a blur. Starts slow. A lot of hills. And then it picks up speed. Peaks, plunges, double upside down loops that take our breath away, curves we didn't see coming. And before we know it, the air brakes are pushing in, and we're coasting into the station, and somebody else is taking our place. I looked at Abby. She looked up at me. Dad, which part did you like best? You know what I said? Being with you. Being with you. That's which part I like best. I'm an old guy. I'm talking to people decades younger than I am tonight, and a few decades older than I am tonight. The wisdom that I've gotten from the mountaintop place of looking back over a lot of years is this place and this point. That which means the most, that which has sustained me in a way that nothing else could, that which matters more than anything else, is that in every one of those pits and rocks and disorientations and new beginnings and upsets and start over agains and neutral zones, in every one of those, God has been with me. And to ride the ride with God is the only way to arrive at a place one day where you stand on a mountaintop and are able to confess, surely the goodness and the mercy of God have followed me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I've kind of carried an image of that roller coaster ride with me across these years. That moment when I looked over at Abby, and she was just, woo! And in my memory and in my consciousness, that little girl has become a Christ figure for me. The Christ who is riding the blur of life along with me is going, woo! I'm enjoying this. Are you? We serve a God who wants to enjoy this journey with us if we will let Him. A God who buckled in right there through everything we're going to go through, has His hands in the air, is not afraid of what's next, and who will so be with us that we can kind of stop white-knuckling the bar, and we can stop closing our eyes, and we can stop worrying about getting dizzy in the double upside down loop, and we can stop being afraid of what's at the bottom of the plunge, and we can just sort of do this too and say, woo, the Lord is with me. I've been thinking about a song. It's a little bit of an old song, and you might not know it. The words are this. When I walked through the door, I sensed His presence, and I knew this was a place where love abounds. For this is a temple, Jehovah God abides here. We are standing in His presence on holy ground. If you know the chorus, sing it with me. We are standing on holy ground, and I know that there are angels all around. Let us praise Jesus now. We are standing in His presence on holy ground. Could we stand? I'm going to ask that you'd sing that chorus again with me in a second. But you know what I suspect? I suspect there's some people in here tonight that are in a pit. You get 10 people together, anytime 3 of them are in a pit. I'm telling you, a third of humanity is in the pit at any given moment in time. I don't know what your pit is about. Your good shepherd does. There's probably a third of you that are on a rock. Woohoo! And where it would be easy to lose touch of the presence of the God who got you up on the rock. I got it now, God. Don't worry. I'm good from here. Maybe it would be a good moment tonight for you to become very aware of the presence of the God who set your feet on a rock, on a solid rock, to stay for a little while at least. And then others of you were just sort of looking back over life and contemplating this wonderful God that is yours. There's some folk here who are really working hard to build a container. Yeah, I mean, you want your container to be pretty spectacular. You want to put stuff in it that'll make the world look twice. Is God present in that? Is God in the middle of what you're building? And then others of you who are looking into your container and you don't feel quite so good about it. Or you feel better than you probably should about it. And you're in the process of doing that. There's some of you that endings are going on right now. Endings. Endings of your own choosing or endings not of your choosing. And others of you would say, I am smack dab in the middle of a neutral zone. I've got questions. I don't know about this. And then others of you that are coming out of old orientations into new orientations. What I would say to you is to locate Jesus there with you in this snapshot of where you happen to be right this moment in your life is the most critical thing you can do for the kind of journey that will bring blessing and peace and grace to you your whole life long. And if you would like to avail yourself of a time of prayer here at the altar tonight, it might be a great place to be and a good thing to do. Just a bowing before God and saying, I'm in a pit and I just want to say, I know you're with me. I know that. And I know it doesn't make the pit end immediately. Or God, for the rock you just put me on. Or I'm in the neutrals. Wherever you are. I mean, I've given you all kind of locations tonight. But if you'd like to pray, you're in the presence of a very good shepherd and a gracious host whose arms are open to you saying, come, child. I want you to be aware that I know where you are. I've come to where you are. And I am with you in this moment. So as we sing together, if you'd like to come pray, feel free to come pray. Band, go ahead and come if you want. You're going to sing us out with a song of deep surrender to this good shepherd in a moment. But let's just sing, we are standing on holy ground, and I know that there are angels all around. Let us praise Jesus now. We are standing in His presence on holy ground. Let's sing a song of surrender to this shepherd.